The movie begins as we see a single mother named Renee Morgan, who lives with her son, Evan. She is getting ready for the day when she suddenly stumbles upon a spider in the bathroom. This makes Renee scream in fear, so Evan promptly arrives and takes the spider away from her sight. Only after this, Renee breathes a sigh of relief and lies down on her bed. During breakfast, Evan complains about a faulty light cable and suggests calling the electrician. However, Renee shows him a box cutter and claims she can fix it herself. Evan then explains that he needs her help with an assignment on his family tree homework. He has already done his mother's side, but he needs his father's background as well. Since he is distant from his dad, he asks Renee for help in convincing him, which she agrees to. At this moment, we see that their house is tapped by some cameras, and someone is watching them without their knowledge. Meanwhile, a bald man shows up outside and sticks a device in Renee's car. In the house, Evan is struggling with math homework, and he gets frustrated and curses himself. Renee then tells her son to quickly get in the car. They are actually going to his dad's place, where Evan will be staying for the weekend. During the drive, the bald man follows them closely. Renee tells her son that she is going skydiving today with a friend. Just then, they receive a voicemail from Evan's father cursing at her, which ruins their mood. After a while, the two reach Evan's father's place, and Renee talks with her ex-husband and mentions that Evan was upset when he heard the angry voicemail. But Dad claims it's her fault for playing it in front of their son. She then tells him how frustrated Evan gets when he can't solve math problems. Following this, Renee heads to meet her friend, with whom she is going skydiving, while the bald man and his associate are following her closely. When they arrive at a quiet area, these people use a remote control and suddenly burst Renee's car tire. Panicked, she goes out to check, only to find an iron wedge stuck in the wheel. At this moment, a man stops his truck nearby and offers to help Renee change the tire. She agrees and feels happy that there are kind people to help her in the middle of nowhere. As the driver pulls out the spare tire from the trunk, his companion gets out to smoke. But while Renee's distracted,
Go!
they suddenly gang up on her, pin her to the ground, and tase her. They put tape all over her face and load her in the truck. Inside, there's an elderly lady named Dr. Nyman, and they cuff Renee to the seat. Nyman then cuts her jeans, saying it'll make it easier for her to pee on their long trip. During the trip, Renee tries different ways to free herself and escape, but without success. Later, when they stop at a gas station, Dr. Nyman makes a hole in the tape over Renee's mouth and offers her a spiked drink. Although she refuses it, the woman continues to force her until she eventually swallows it. Renee asks what they want from her, but Dr. Nyman doesn't respond and leaves. Moments later, the drink begins to take effect, and she falls into a deep sleep. In the following scene, Renee wakes up and realizes she's being wheeled into a facility on a stretcher. Here, she notices another captive named Seth on a nearby stretcher. She asks him why they've been kidnapped, and he explains that the captors need them for something called G1012X. When Renee asks what it means, Seth admits he has no idea. Just then, a staff member arrives and escorts Renee to her assigned room. Moments later, another staff member enters the room and removes the tape from her face. He tells her that she can scream all she wants, but no one will come to save her, and she will just disturb the other subjects. He then compliments Renee's skin and tells her not to worry because the process will be over soon. She tries to protest and begins to kick him, but he easily subdues her. He informs her that she might think she won't survive this, but the result will amaze her. After he leaves, Renee looks around the room and sees many surgical instruments. She then shakes out her box cutter, which turns out to be hidden in her shoes. When she tries to reach it with her hand, she struggles a lot, making a lot of noise. Another captive in the next room hears this and begins talking with her. The man claims that his name is Blake and discloses that the doctors forced the subject to face their fears. Renee then asks what G1012X is, but he claims he has no idea. Blake instead reveals that there are a total of 20 people captivated in this facility, and the guy who was in Renee's room before got released recently. During this, Renee finally manages to retrieve the box cutter. But she doesn't get to use it much as the bald man and a staff member named Diane enter her room for her checkup. Renee tells them about Blake and how he mentioned someone being released from the facility. However, the bald man claims that Blake might be a hallucination, or maybe he does exist and is simply playing mind games with her. The two then wear special glasses and begin checking the health status of Renee. She pleads with them to let her go and claims that she has a son whom she can't abandon. But Diane claims they are aware of Evan and assures her that he is safe with his father. The bald man then begins asking her several questions, such as her date and place of birth, and other personal information. Renee continues to ask them who they are, but they completely ignore her questions. Eventually, she gives up and claims that she is willing to cooperate and do anything to get back to her son. After this, Diane carefully examines Renee's eyesight and asks her to read the last line in an eye chart. However, the latter fails to recognize them. The bald man then quietly recites the numbers, 42, 67, 44, and asks Renee what he said, but she didn't hear him. He asks about her medical history and allergies, and she claims that she had anemia in the past. After completing all the tests, the bald man begins listing a series of fears, and when it comes to spiders, Renee becomes visibly nervous but claims she's not afraid of everything right now. Before departing, he weirdly feels her cheeks with his face and tells her that she will feel it soon. Once she is left alone, Renee brings out the box cutter and tries to sever her straps with it. But the task proves to be too difficult, and she ends up dropping it to the ground. Not long after, Diane returns to the room with a man named Dr. Raxlin. He also feels Renee's cheeks and compliments her skin. He then takes out an injection with some orange substance, and she asks if it's G1012X. Hearing this, Dr. Raxlin is impressed and claims it's good news that she knows about G1012X. As Dr. Raxlin injects Renee with the substance, he informs her that it is a solution that will accelerate the process that will help her live an entirely different way of life. As soon as she gets injected, Renee starts having strange visions and sees Evan get locked up. While she is struggling, we see a man named Terrence, who is in charge of the entire operation. He tells her that she will be allowed to leave soon and meet her son, but they need her first for something. When Renee wakes up, Diane and the bald man transfer her to another room and put more restraints on her right arm. To her horror, after lowering a tube into her arm, they release a big spider that begins crawling toward her. Renee begins to panic, and Diane scares her further by saying that this spider is very venomous and can cause the human spinal fluid to boil. The bald man urges her not to fight and let it happen, but Renee is unable to calm herself. Seeing her so paranoid, they eventually take away the spider and escort her back to her room. The bald man is dismayed about the result, but Diane remains optimistic for the second test. After rubbing his cheek against Renee's face, the bald man asks Renee if she understands what he's trying to tell her, but she doesn't. The bald man believes in Renee because he feels she will rupture every time he touches her. Diane asserts that it is good news and assures Renee that when it happens, her suffering will be over. She claims that when Renee returns to her old life, she will be a changed woman, but she should be aware that the process will be painful as well. After they leave, Renee tries to break free and finally takes off her straps. As she frees herself, she takes out the box cutter, which was dropped earlier. She then opens a vent using the cutter and begins crawling through it. During this time, she sees many captives who are being tortured based on their worst fears. Renee sees a woman who is afraid of heights hanging in the air. Then there's another man who is being tortured by the picture and voice of his father. As she moves forward, she notices Seth drowning in a pool of blood and screaming for help. A while later, Renee reaches a bathroom, where she hears two workers talking about the rupture. She finds out that this is not the only facility, and these ruptures are happening all over the world. One of them complains that there have been 47 ruptures, but only 24 women are fertile. After they leave, Renee also exits the bathroom and continues moving through the vent. Eventually, she finds a ladder leading up to the roof and gets excited. Unfortunately, her hopes are dashed when she realizes that the roof is sealed with grates, leaving her with no means of escape, so she backs down. While exploring the area, she arrives in Blake's room, where he is in the midst of his final test. Renee asks him to run away, but he refuses and claims he is going home soon. She again asks him about G1012X, and he replies that it has something to do with the skin because they were rubbing his face. Just then, a snake begins to crawl up on Blake, and it turns out this is his final test. Suddenly, the staff approaches the room, so Renee quickly hides under the bed. The staff notice Blake's panicked face and express disappointment that he failed the final test. Dr. Raxlin claims that he will be home soon. They then prepare to sedate him for the journey and tell him that this experience will change his way of seeing the world from now on. After they take Blake away, Renee quietly walks through the hallway and continues sneaking around. She eventually enters a lab room, where she discovers a map of facilities around the world where ruptures are performed. But before Renee can investigate more, she feels someone's presence, so she takes off and hides in a room. From there, she sees one of the staff members in a nearby room removing his eye lenses. Seeing his strange reptilian eyes, Renee is terrified and realizes that these people are not humans. Following this, she runs away and reaches the hallways, where she stumbles upon the horrifying sight of Seth's lifeless body. Some staff members also arrive, prompting her to hide in the storeroom. The staff members express their disappointment that Blake and Seth came so close and failed. However, Diane mentions they still have Renee, and the team decides to check on her. This panics Renee, so she swiftly makes her way back to her room through the vent. She straps herself back and lies down on the bed. Moments later, Diane and Dr. Raxlin walk into the room to check up on her. Dr. Raxlin asks her if she experienced hallucinations, but Renee says she doesn't know because she has seen too many weird things. After the doctor leaves, Diane prepares to inject her with the orange substance. She puts down the injection in a nearby tray and claims that this would be so much easier if Renee stopped resisting. She then touches Renee's skin and assures her that they can help solve Evan's inability to control his emotions and math problems. Shocked, Renee asks how she knew, to which Diane reveals that she can find out everything by simply touching her skin. Diane also discloses that G1012X is a genetic code present within the human body's chromosomes. Through the activation of this code, they modify people's DNA to help them conquer their fears. This process is termed Rupture. She explains that this process can give people different abilities, allowing them to change their skin, similar to how snakes shed their old skin and regenerate a new one. To demonstrate this, Diane takes out her lenses and shows her strange reptilian eyes. She also deforms her face for a while before reverting back to her original form. The sight horrifies Renee, so she quickly grabs the nearby syringe and stabs Diane in the neck. After the woman falls unconscious, Renee uses her hand to open the security door. She then puts Diane on a stretcher and leaves the room. While running away, Renee comes across a lab, where she notices the names of all the people who have been ruptured. She realizes that this has been going on for more than 100 years now. At that moment, Dr. Raxlin and the bald man arrive to look at the ovum they removed from Renee. Dr. Raxlin claims that Renee is fertile, but she is no longer accepting any human sperm. It means that her egg might now only receive DNA from their kind. Hearing this, Renee begins to run away, but the bald man soon notices her. However, instead of chasing her through the facility, he goes to a computer and uses it to find her location. When he locates her spot, he blocks her escape route with a massive glass door. He releases chemical gas into the chamber, swiftly rendering Renee unconscious. In the following scene, Renee awakens in a different room to find herself hooked up to N4. Here, she begins crying helplessly while missing her son, and the bald man, Terrence, Diane, and Dr. Nyman enter to check on her. Diane explains that it has been a day and a half since she lost consciousness. Renee didn't feel that long, so Terrence reveals that time moves at a different pace for them. She then asks if they are going to punish her for escaping, but he replies that they won't because they like people with strong survival instincts. At that moment, Dr. Nyman quietly mumbles to herself, 426744. And this time, Renee hears it clearly and repeats it when they ask her. After that, Dr. Nyman shows her a document from a distance, which she manages to read successfully. Renee is horrified and claims she doesn't want to transform into them, but Terrence asks her not to resist this marvelous evolution. This is the next step on the evolutionary ladder, where all human emotional nonsense can be erased forever. She is then shown CCTV footage of Evan, and Terrence tells her that once she is ruptured, she will no longer feel human love. Plus, her medical records will help them find more people like her. Terrence acknowledges that they're not human, but they all started as humans, just like Renee. Their fear transformed them into someone new once they get past their terror. To add, the human race is already destroying the Earth, so they believe they can cure humanity of its self-destructive tendencies by building their numbers and altering the gene pool. The subjects who fail to rupture are returned to their homes safely if they survive. However, some of them do not make it out of the facility because their DNA is corrupted. Following this, the team forcibly captures Renee and straps her with a transparent helmet for her final test. Numerous spiders are then released, crawling all over her face. Renee begins to panic and runs frantically, while banging her head on the glass panel. She screams in terror and pleads with them to remove the helmet, but the doctors continue to observe. After screaming and struggling for a while, Renee eventually gives up and realizes that she is no longer afraid. Suddenly, her face begins to hideously distort, and the helmet also cracks on its own, while the spiders continue to crawl on her face. In the next scene, we find Renee back in her home, living a seemingly normal life. She is practicing with Terrence how to explain to her friends and family about the changes in her behavior. While doing so, she notices a spider in the bathroom. This time, she casually catches it and releases it outside without any fear. Later that day, Renee tells Evan that she has met some people who are good at math and can help him. It will require him to attend a workshop for a few days, but Evan refuses. He tells her that she has been acting very weird, then angrily walks away from there. Not long after, the bald man, Dr. Raxlin, and Terrence show up at the house and ask about Evan. Renee tells them that he is upstairs, packing his things. They explain that even after the rupture, she is still fertile, and Evan might also have the potential to be like her. So, they want him to be like them and head upstairs to find him. However, despite everything, Renee still loves her son, so she quickly texts him and asks him to run away as fast as he can. Evan climbs through the window and escapes on his bicycle. Seeing this, Terrence tells Renee that they won't chase after him because Renee will eventually help them find the boy. Her feelings of love for him will soon disappear, and the only thing she will care about is the number of children she will give to their kind. In the end, Terrence reveals that they have been waiting for her for a long time, and they finally have a chance to rupture more people and breed because of her. Thus, we reach the end of this film. Thanks for watching. You can like this video to support us. Don't forget to subscribe for more content. See you in the next video. Goodbye.